Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. And today I'm really excited to be filming this video. I mean, I'm always pretty excited to be filming videos. It's one of the reasons why I'm able to consistently post so many videos, because I genuinely enjoy filming them. But you know, today is one of those days where I'm filming a couple of my favorite options. So one of the things that I just did last night is I knew I was going to bulk film today, being that it is a holiday day and tomorrow I'm going to be reading A Court of Silver Flames and I won't want to do anything besides that. So I put out two polls. I put out one poll for my channel as a whole to pick from some video ideas, and then I did one that was for my channel members to pick a video they wanted me to do. And the one that my channel members voted on for me to do is top tier romances. So I wasn't thinking too clearly when I just put this as an option, because I did a live show recently just because, and I always ask people for video recommendations when I do those because it's the perfect time with us all there together for people to throw those recommendations my way. And so top tier romances, I wasn't quite sure how to break that down, but as always, I'm just going to kind of go with what my gut tells me. And so another thing too is for my birthday month, which is the month of March. My birthday's March 18th, just in case you're wondering. I'm going to be doing a lot of videos that have to do with my favorite things, like within romance and my favorite things like that. And so you will probably see a lot of these books and characters and stuff re-shown. The thing is that because these are about my like personal favorites, they're not just recommendations, I don't feel bad about that, because for nostalgia purposes, I like to do a favorites video every once in a while to just see how my taste has changed and to see which romances stay on it. Because there are a few that have continued to endure for me. For some of them, the case is between 5 to 10 years. Like specifically, there's one book on here that's been on this list for at least a decade, and others have come in over the time. So we're gonna do with this, I think I have about 12, and I kind of broke them up into YA, then there is contemporary, and then there's like dark contemporary and like regular, and you'll see what I mean, and then historical. So that's kind of how we're gonna go through this. So I'm gonna start with kind of the YA / new adult ones with romances that I think are top tier. So the way that I decided that is it's not only books that are my favorites, but books that make me so excited about the romance that's in them. And like there's a separate video I'm going to be doing that has favorite couples, and there's a lot of crossover for that one, because obviously if it's a top tier romance for me, I like both of the couples. But sometimes, you know, you like one part of the pair more than the other, but you're still here for the whole romance, even though that's a thing. And then there's some of them that you just love the feeling you get when you read the book. So I'm going to go through, I have two that are kind of YA young adult. And the one of them is, this gets brought up a lot on my channel. It used to when it first came out, and then a lot recently because I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. And that's Lovely War by Julie Berry. So this story is very intense. It's more of a YA historical fiction, but it's also mixed with this magical element, okay? So let me just read you the description to this book so that you get what I mean. So, a sweeping, multi-layered romance set in the perilous days of World War I and II, where gods hold the fates and the hearts of 4 mortals in their hands. They are Hazel, James, Aubrey, and Colette, a classical pianist from London, a British would-be architect turned soldier, a Harlem-born ragtime genius in the U.S. Army, and a Belgian orphan with a gorgeous voice and a devastating past. Their story, as told by goddess Aphrodite, who must spin the tale or face judgment on Mount Olympus, is filled with hope, heartbreak, prejudice, and passion, and reveals that, though war is a formidable force, it is no match for the transcendent power of love. Like, this book is, as it says, told from the perspective of Aphrodite, and she actually calls in other people to like give evidence for her, because that's a setup, is that she gets caught cheating on Hephaestus with, I think it's with Ares, and he ends up like, prove to me why your powers are important. It's random, I know. And so we get Aphrodite's POV, as well as we have Ares, and I think we see Apollo and Hades and all of these people, and how they were a part of making these two love stories happen. This book is just, I haven't reread it in so long because I'm afraid. It gave me so many feelings, but there is a HEA for both couples, I promise. But it is like, and then the broader story that's being told with Aphrodite and Hephaestus and all the gods as well, and being shown what like the importance of love is, even in, and especially in a time of war. It's so powerful. And recently there's a book coming out called Love and War that reminded me of this a lot. But this one is just, it's told like a play. Like, it literally has 3 acts to it. And there's like a chorus break where we like, or an intermission where we come back and talk about the story. So this one is, it's so good. And for me, it's a top tier romance. Even though it's YA, even though it's a story about war, I don't love stories about war. It's one of the parts of historical romance I usually like really shy away from, is when there's heavy war aspects, because I'm here for the romance. I'm not here for the suffering. But this book, it just has to be on this list, and it's really kind of like the outlier within everything else. But definitely check this book out. Then the other one, as I said, that's like kind of YA, kind of new adult, is ACMAF. I was just talking with a lot of friends recently who are just starting to read this series for the first time, which just blows my mind. But I absolutely love that people are still willing to pick up this YA/new adult story that there's been so much sass about and everything. But I tell them when they get to this book that it isn't just the series as a whole that I love, but specifically this book, this couple, this found family, this world. It is in my top books of all time. And so it's going to be on a lot of lists when you see my favorite things. And like, I just don't give a fuck. I think that this story, as it plays out, is so intelligently put together. And it's okay. It's totally okay if you think it's just face smut. But number one, I'll tell you that there isn't as much smut in this book as you think. So please don't just judge it that you think it's pure fairy smut, because it's not. I've read face smut. I'm not judging either one. I love it all. But this has such deep meaning, and the journey that this pair goes on together, and the way that they're vulnerable with each other, but yet have this relationship of like, you can be vulnerable with me, I'm never going to betray it, but also if you just want to chill, then I will fuck off and let you do that. If you just need to be, if you need space, if you need comfort, I'm here. As well as in the midst of everything that's happening within the world, and there is a danger that we're preparing for, and it's pretty important. Like, it's pretty important. But our relationship is also really important. And how do we juggle that? I don't know. I'm doing such a shit job, but I just love it. And I love that friends who are trying this for the first time are picking up on that too. And that it doesn't feel young. And these are very intelligent women. And I mean, anyway. This is an enduring love for me, and this is a top tier romance for me because of how it's written. And it really is a fantasy romance. To me, it's one of the first of the genre that can clearly be called fantasy romance, and not just fantasy and not just romance. Because for me, it's whenever the romance is like integral to the plot of the story, then it should be called a fantasy romance. Whereas if it's a fantasy world, but then we have a couple that are just like, there's also sexy times in it, then it could be just a fantasy with smut or something. But to me, the relationship that's built in here, if you completely took that away, you would not get as much out of this story as you do. Personal opinion. So it's really hard to read the title on this cover. I wish it was a little darker, but A Court of Mist and Fury is in my top tier romances. It just is. It's so good. Okay, so those are the two that are like kind of YA / magical and stuff like that. Now let's dive into the contemporary ones. So this was like so hard to pick some. And also because I don't always connect with contemporary couples the most. And I know that's weird because I'm actually from quote unquote the real world and I'm not from a magical world, but I feel like the conflicts that happen in contemporary romance books, it's easier to judge those people. I'm just saying. And when they make stupid decisions, I'm like, you're being a dumb bitch or you're being a stupid dude. Just talk to the person, which even though in real life, it's really hard to just talk to people. So I know that. They're just characters that I tend to judge harsher because I can more easily put myself in their shoes. Whereas if I'm reading about Feyre or I'm reading about people that are in a war, I'm like, I don't know how to communicate with that. I'm like, what? But if we're talking about like college kids or high school students, I'm like, bitch, make a better decision. But I'm going to start with the ones that are contemporary and then we'll do the dark contemporary because I come at them for very different ways. This book will be no surprise, although I myself, I was struggling if I wanted to put them on my top tier romances because I'm actually not going to have this couple in my favorite couples because there are other couples that I love more. But the book itself and how it's put together and how the romance is done, yes, the Takeover is going to fucking be on this list because for many reasons. There are parts of this that are completely and totally exaggerated. Yeah, that's a thing. But I have people in my life. I have had surrogate parents. And though I'm not someone who's had a parent who died, I went through a period in my life where I could not talk to my dad about anything. We did not connect. My father was an alcoholic for the bulk of my life. And so I had surrogate dads. And I know I'm making parallels about this as a thing, but when there are people who are able to affect you that way and they didn't birth you and you still feel so supported and loved and connected to them, there's something magical in that and so special about those relationships. So even though now for the past 6 years, I've had a really good relationship with my dad and I don't have that same damage that I did, I'm still so close with some of those men who are good examples for me and loved me and gave me advice. And it didn't matter that I wasn't their kid. And so there's parts of Tristan that I just really, my heart is just there for it. Also, I'm also 28 and he's 33 and I also am just fucking into this guy. And I also feel for Claire too, because I also have friends who are single moms, or have friends who are raised by single moms. One of my best friends was raised by a single mom, and she had some like bad experience with stepdads. And I don't know, I love how this story was put together. I love how like shitty her kids are to him and how protected they are of their mom, but then he doesn't just give up and he doesn't just be like, well, I don't need to like your kids, like I'm here for you. You know, Claire is very clear with him that my kids are my life. It's my kids and my company and then myself. And sorry, I'm not explaining the whole plot to this. If you don't know the plot for the Takeover, I'm sorry, go look it up, but I'm not going to do the full plot for every one of these books. I'm just saying why they're top tier for me. Sorry if I didn't say that at the beginning. I'm sorry. And I just love how real that felt because I personally believe that your relationship with your spouse should be the most important part, should be the foundation of a relationship. But let's say you're someone who you're divorced or your spouse has died and you have kids, like your kids would then become that center. And how do you like crack open the door of your heart to a man who, number one, starts as a one-night stand and you kind of hate, but you're having hate sex with? How do you open up a door to your family, to this person that you don't think is ready to be a father of 3? And also you loved your husband. So how, you know, like I just had, even though there are parts of this, and the reason why they won't fully make it on my favorite couple, because it's really Tristan who makes this book for me. and he will be on a book boyfriend. Over time, he's making his way up to book husband. I'll tell you, I have tiers of that. That's a different thing. If you see my book boyfriend list, you know that I have a book husband, and no one else has come close to him in all my times. But Tristan's close, guys. The more I read and talk with people about him, he's getting close. What a weird conversation to have. I love it. And I love that the struggle is real. I love that he's not a pushover and doesn't just bow to whatever whims that Claire has for her family. Because, yeah, I love that. And I know some of my friends who actually have kids, this was like hard for them to love because they're like, I would not let this guy be that way with my kids. But like, her kids are shits until they get someone who isn't there to just like smack down and be a disciplinarian, but there to like communicate with them and be like, hey, I can be a friend slash a role model to you. Not necessarily, because you can be a role model without being a dad right away. And honestly, like, what's so special about this book and makes it top tier is it's a man falling in love with a family. Not just a woman, not just them finding their connection, which is what we're here for with romance, but he legit falls in love with a family. And that is not going to be without strife. And I love it. It just has to be in my top tier. Because Tristan fucking Miles, guys, he's amazing. So, this book is so precious to me. It's so precious to me. All right. So then I have one that I kind of put this in dark romance, but it's not the same kind of bonkers plot that the other two are when we get to my favorite dark romances that are top tier. But I read this book just a couple months ago, and I understand why everyone feels the way they do about it. And I understand. I understand. And so this book is one of those where I don't want to reread this book. It's kind of the same way I feel about Lovely War, right? But when I read this book, every page was really clear to me that this is just, it's top tier. So it deserves a space. And that is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. I mean, I think a lot of us know that Kennedy Ryan should be on all the top lists. Like, I know it. And I'll fully admit that I haven't read a lot of her books. I've only read 3. I've read Long Shot, Hook Shot, and Queen Move. And part of it is that they're so gut-wrenching and they're just so raw, and she's able to put you in these situations that I don't want to be in. Like, I don't want to be in the situation that Iris is in this book. No matter how fantastic August is, I don't want to be there. But what happens to this woman in here and the abusive relationship that she's in, I have seen it before. Like, I have a loved one who is in one like that. And not the full level of manipulation, because this does have some kind of like OJ vibes going on with it. But I just felt for these characters so much, and I wept my way through this, even though I knew what was going to happen, because this is one that I've listened to so many podcasts about it, and I've listened to people rave about it, and it is one of the ones on this list where, like, it deserves a spot on the list, even though it's not pleasant. It's still beautiful to watch this woman come out the other side. Like, you read the first 60% of this book so that you can have the last 20% of this book. Does that make sense? So I had to put August and Iris on this list. I think I said both their names right. Yeah, Iris and August. But it's not comfortable. And I mean, the trigger warnings exist for a reason. Also, I have this beautiful signed copy of this one. So it's so pretty. Okay, now I'm going to switch to full dark romance. And I have 2 books for that. So let's start with one. This one has been on my list for a while. I read this book quite a long time ago. It was actually one of my first student teacher, and it was one of my first BDSM. I'd read a few of both before, but this was the one this was fantastic, and that is Dark Notes by Pam Godwin. This is top tier for me because of a couple things that it does. One, definitely look up the trigger warnings for this. This is a student-teacher relationship. It starts when she's 17. Nothing fully sexual when she's 17, but there are things happening. So just know that. There's also an assault in the first page, not by the hero. This one isn't one of those. We'll get to that. But the reason I love this one is this book is about a woman learning what the word no means. And on top of that, learning that there are words that are stronger than no, and that you are in control of your body, and how BDSM can give you that. So we have this girl, her name is Ivory, and she has been abused pretty much the whole time she's been a woman. She's in a really horrible situation. Again, I wasn't going to go into every detail about the stories because you can look them up. But the reason why I'm saying why is that she has to use her body as a commodity. She's basically being forced to be a hooker in like by certain people. That's what's happening. She's having to barter for her safety and sometimes for money, but just to keep herself afloat, because she's a really talented pianist and she goes to this really special school, but she's like, this school is paid for because her father did it before he died, but her family has no money otherwise, and she is exploited by that fact. And so a new teacher, his eye gets caught on her, and some inappropriate stuff starts happening. However, he is going to stay away from her until he sees the danger that she's in. And this is fictional. Guys, we know. I'm not going to explain my love of everything. I promise this isn't one of those talks. I'm just telling you what I love. But what I love about Emmerich is that he is going to stay away from her. Like, there's a few inappropriate things, but he's like, I don't want to get into this. And then he sees how this woman is being treated. And because he's a dom, and he sees the natural submissive tendencies, and then he sees what's happening to her, he's like, this girl, this woman, this young woman, like, she needs a good power dynamic. And she needs someone who gives her power back, because she doesn't have it. She doesn't, like, no one has respected her. No one has stopped when she said stop. So those words don't mean anything anymore to her because no one listens to them. And so Emmerich, by scooping her up into this relationship, becoming a dom to her, he gives her words that are more powerful than no. He gives her a safe word and teaches her that this word is your total control. And in the situations where we have sexual things going on in our relationship, you are in control. That doesn't mean that you can just do that whenever you want, which, I mean, these are the BDSM parts of it. Like, a normal relationship, you can stop anything you want. We know this. He's like, I just want you to be cared for. Yeah, I also want to fuck you. Like, let's not pretend this is just completely a altruistic thing he's doing. Like, there's fucking involved. But the way that he gives her her power back and helps free her of some of those demons, I've read books since this that do that. But Pam Godwin has an amazing way of doing it, and I love this couple, and more so even than Sea of Ruin. This is my, like, most top tier book of her. Like, Sea of Ruin I love for a whole lot of other reasons too, but when I was making a top tier list, I was like, okay, do I want Sea of Ruin or do I want Dark Notes? And it honestly has to be Dark Notes, because in Sea of Ruin, Bennett already knows that she has the power, okay? It might get taken from her sometimes and, like, manipulated, but she knows she's strong and fierce and powerful. And Ivory doesn't. And Emmerich helps her find that. And that's one of my favorite things to read in a romance. So I understand this is not a book for everybody. But you know what? You know what's really not a book for everybody? That's still on my top tier? That's Untouchable. So let's move along to this. This is Untouchable by Sam Mariano. If for some reason this is your first video you've ever seen from me, this is one of the darkest romances I've ever read. I mean, it's not, because I've read things about serial killers and stuff, but this one is the scariest because it feels so real. Like, it feels like you're in the shit with this couple. So this book, again, I'm not saying what everything's about, but please look up the trigger warnings for this. This book is almost completely non-consent, as in there are rape and assault scenes between the hero and the heroine. Okay? There are. This is still in my top tier romances in the dark romance section because I love the mind games happening in this book. And I love that this is a hero who he lays out everything that he is. And I don't want to say at the feet of the heroine. He lays out who he is kind of in her face and is like, this is who I am. And she doesn't flinch from it. She's like, asks questions. She examines it. She's like, but why? This is a book that, in general, the hero doesn't change. They get better at communication throughout the book. So I do want to say, some people say there's no arc in this book. I disagree. I think there is an arc. I think the arc, though, just has a lot to do with the heroine. And it's about the heroine learning herself and her kinks and what she wants in a relationship. And she just is kind of literally thrust in the way of Carter Mahoney. And they discover that together. And also more define what his kinks are, too. And he's a twisted motherfucker. Like, I'm not even going to pretend otherwise. But so many people who've been willing to try this book who like dark romance, like, you have to like dark romance to read this, okay? And even though if you like dark romance, you might not like him, okay? Please don't just read my top tier romances and then like this. I'm warning you. But even my friends who read it and like didn't like it, they understand what I meant about the mind games bit, because sometimes you can just read this and be like, this isn't a romance. And I mean, for me it is, and it's in my top tier because of that. So Carter Mahoney, he has his place for me. All right, so now we're moving into, I actually have okay, we'll do the 4 historical romance, and then I actually have 2 that are like, technically will be shelved as fiction, even though they're, the romances are the parts that I like. So let's go through 4 historicals, and this was super hard to choose which of the historical romances were top tier for me. It was really hard. But I went through all my favorite authors, and I was like, which of these books would I like? Do I just think of the couples and the relationship and just be like, I love it so much? And I found 3 of those for me that make it. One of them is a brand new edition, which I know I'm going to love forever. But I have to have The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie by Jennifer Ashley. This book has a neuroatypical hero who is written as if he's on the autism spectrum, and about a widow named Beth who from their first meeting have this explosive chemistry, and Ian has never felt this connection to someone before, but he's different, and he's seen as being mad because they didn't know what autism was or how to deal with it, and he used to be punished for how special that he was, and he can hear a song on the piano and then be able to play it back perfectly. And Beth, she is a pretty free woman. Like, she's a widow who has a lot of money. She's looking to marry mostly for companionship. And then the man she's about to marry, Ian, kind of pops her soap bubble and lets her know that he's actually has a bunch of mistresses and isn't planning to give them up. He just wants her money. And so she's like, oh, well, fuck it. I don't need to marry anyone. And then Ian's like, wait. But I want to marry you. And it's about him making that happen. Ian Mackenzie is, I mean, I love him so much. He's on my book Boyfriends. He's on my top favorite. This is one of my top favorite books. It is just such a pleasure to read. I love how the romance unfolds. I love how Beth has, like, she was married to a pastor before this too, and she had a pretty good sex life with her pastor husband. So she's not some like innocent, she's a bit older, not older than Ian, but like she's a bit older in life. Like this isn't a debutante. And so watching how she starts to kind of like not figure Ian out, but be able to, you know, find ways to express their feelings to each other. Does he have feelings? Does he understand what they are? This is one of those where like the hero says he can't love. I have a huge kink for that. And even more so with this, where he legitimately doesn't think he can love because he doesn't understand the emotion. And Beth can see that he loves her in the things that he does, but will she be okay if he never says it? And that's something that she has to come to, you know, she has to come to it or not. But yeah, definitely top tier for me. I love this one. It's also Scottish, so there's that. Then, again, The Magic by Lisa Kleypas. I just fucking have to have this book on here. I was like going back and forth between Lisa Kleypas books. I'm like, which one? I was like, Jenn, this isn't even a question. Like, why are you debating it? It has to be, again, The Magic, this book. Funny story though, like, this is not my favorite couple, but it's one of my favorite heroes. This is my top 3 favorite Kleypas heroes, but the heroine is frustrating for me, and it's McKenna. Oh my god, it's fucking McKenna who makes this story for me. He comes back into our heroine's life to just destroy her, but it's always him who was in danger because he loves this woman so fiercely. And the reason he's so angry and so hurt is because they had a foiled love story. Like, their love of childhood had an abrupt abort. Like, it couldn't happen because her father wasn't going to let it happen. And now he's rich and he's back and he wants revenge. The only thing is, Aline has never stopped loving him or wanting him or regretting that that's the way it went down. And she has some issues, guys. Like, she has some issues. This book also has a secondary love story that is one of my favorite. Like, the secondary love story in this is still on my top romances, like, ever. It's fantastic. About Aline's sister, Olivia, who falls in love with John's friend, John McKenna's friend. And he is an alcoholic, and she's like, I'm not going to marry an alcoholic, but also you need to sort yourself out for yourself, not for me. And that, you know, given what I already said in this video of having a father who's an alcoholic, that is absolutely true. Like, alcoholism wasn't addressed the same way, especially among the aristocracy. And so seeing that addressed, that it could still be a problem and waste someone away, was really amazing. I don't know. I love this story so much. It's so precious. It's so beautiful. I reread it in December because I was rereading my favorite books, and I cried through half of it because John McKenna has such a righteous anger. Like, that's not often. It's not often that I'm like, yes, hero, be angry at this heroine. But the way that he's angry, it's a hurt because he thought that this was the most perfect love of his life. And the thing is, she still is perfect for him, but that doesn't mean your love is perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's messy and ugly and scarred. And that's something that Aline, who is a beautiful woman and has always been praised for her beauty, she has some insecurities that are very ugly, and she's afraid of someone seeing them, you know? And McKenna is just so angry that she would let those insecurities keep them apart. And so when he's angry about it, it's number one, everything we're thinking. We're like, thank you for saying this to her. And number two, he still loves her, and he's like, you would never turn your back on me if this was the problem with me. And so much more will I not turn my back on you because of you. And just, I just love it. This is my top tier. It's fantastic, and it will always be special to me. It's so good. The last one, that's straight up historical romance. Again, this is brand new, but when I was making this list, we'll see what its longevity is. I mostly feel like it's here because I just read it and it gave me everything I wanted, but also it's just a good freaking book. And I was listening to Fated Mace has a podcast episode on this book, and they just like articulate to me a lot of the reasons why I love stuff, which is why I love that. But it's Devil's Bride by Stephanie Lawrence. This is the first book in the Sinster series. There's a prequel as well, but it was like written later on. And this is just the reasons why I love this book is a few things. One, the sex scenes are freaking gorgeous. And this is one of the things I was listening to the episode and like, there's a 30-page sex scene in this book. And to me, it wasn't because like, it's not gratuitous. It's written in this way where it's almost magical, the feelings that they're having for each other's. And like when they orgasm, it's like it literally says that they like went to another plane, like they're on another plane of existence. Like literally these people's orgasms are knocking them out, and I'm like, I'll have what she's having, please and thank you. Also, I love this because there's a hero who sees what he wants, sees the woman, and is like, you are it for me, and then spends the next like 60% of the book convincing her of that. And he's a bit alpha about it. A bit. Snow is a bit wet, okay? Like, he's alpha about it. But it works because our heroine is so strong, and so she never just gives in to this guy. And it's really beautiful to watch the dance that they go through and how it all happens. And it just makes me so happy. And yeah, I loved it. I loved all the little scenes of them slowly breaking each other down. I love the communication in this book. Oh my God. My most recent wrap up, or I mean, it might not, I don't know when this video is going up, but it's for week 7 of the year. If you want to watch it, I do a 15-minute long, like, deep dive into why I love this book. This video is already getting really long and I still have 2 more to talk about, but this just had to be on the list for me because I hadn't read anything like it in so long. And just the communication and the respect that the 2 leads had for each other, I was like, it's gotta be on here. It's gotta be. All right, so I have 2 left that are historical fiction, but the romance is really special. So it's funny because, yeah, I'll just show you. So one of them is Poldark. This first book is actually called Ross Poldark by Winston Graham. The first 3 books I own in this series all have the tie-in covers, but I really am meaning the like original covers of this. But there are 12 books in the Poldark saga by Winston Graham. They were written over the course of like 40 years. Like, this first one was written in 1945, guys. They take place in Cornwall, England. And they're about a man coming back from the Revolutionary War, where he was on the side of the British. And he comes home to his father's dead, his estate's in ruins, his servants have been stealing from him, and the woman that he loves has heard he was dead and is now marrying his cousin. So that is what this man comes back to. Yes, there's a TV show, and the first season kind of does okay, but I'm telling you, the books, especially the audiobooks, if you're someone who loves audiobooks, you could check these out from your library. They're read by Oliver Hembrough, and he was one of my first narrators I listened to, because I listened to these books over the course of like 2 years, because only the first 4 books had audiobooks when I first started listening, and then since the TV show was popular, they put the rest of them out. But this is about, he ends up falling for his servant girl. Her name is Demelza, and he actually brings her into his home when she's like 13, and so nothing happens between the 2 of them until she's 17, which I know seems young, but thinking of the times, and he's 10 years older than her, so he's 27 and she's 17 when something starts to happen. And because he like technically is like a lord, like he, you know, he has a title, but they call him captain instead of anything else because he was a captain in the military. And so he ends up marrying his servant girl because he's like, you know what, I have feelings for her, I've slept with her, and I want a wife and a family, so let me just marry her. And it starts out, again, this one particularly, like, this is historical fiction, so there's a lot of other things going on. But the reason why this is top tier romance to me is because I read all 12 books. I've read all 12 books of this series. And I love watching the longevity of their relationship. And I love watching it change and twist, and through tragedies and through the births of children and through poverty and wealth. Like, they really go through the entire gambit of their vows. Do you know what I mean? Like, for rich or for poor, in sickness and in health, in good times and bad. Like, they go through it all. And as you're going to see with my favorite top tier romance, for me, when I get to spend that amount of time with a couple, with a family, to me, that's what real romance is living out your life with the person, not just the hot spark that comes from a one-night stand. Like, those are still hot, and we have a place for them. But for me, the stories and the things that are top tier are when I get to live out their lives with them. And if you couldn't guess, if you weren't sure what the highest tier of romance is for me, and what I don't hold other romances to this standard because they would fail. And I believe in, you know, helping people pass. But that would be Outlander. Specifically the whole saga, because we don't get to see as much of the marriage comparison, the whole thing. But similar to Poldark, and actually probably why I love Poldark so much, because I was actually reading these books for the first time at the same time. I believe it was in 2017 that I read both of these series. I was making my way through them. But see what I mean? This is housed in general fiction. Really, it's like historical fiction, but really it's historical romance to me. And I know why it's not categorized as romance. I understand. I'm not like fighting it. I get why it's put in fiction, general fiction, or historical fiction, because we've also yet to have a complete happy ending. Like, this doesn't have HEAs because it's an ongoing saga. So being the person who's like, the definition of romance is like, you know, we have a happily ever after. And I mean, this series will probably end with the death of characters, in my opinion. I mean, that's the only way that we'd believe that it stops. But the full width and depth and breadth of this relationship, just, it spans decades and centuries and thousands of pages. Just in time spent, I have spent more time with the couple and couples of this series more than any other, just because of the fact I've read this series 2.5 times, and the amount of pages and story, and nothing else comes close to how real this relationship feels, how deep and true and abiding it feels to me, and how death cannot stop true love type of thing that this is. And I love it so much, guys. I love it so much. Like, I have videos upon videos ranting about how much I care about this couple, so have at it. But this is my tippiest top tier romance that exists in this general fiction book, in this historical fiction book, whatever you want to fucking call it. Jamie and Claire Fraser are my top tier. So, spoiler alert for my favorite couples video. Just okay, I've talked far too much or far too little for what you think. These are my top tier romance. What makes a romance top tier to you? I feel like I've hit on a couple of things as I worked my way through the genres and the books that are my favorites in this. But let me know what yours are. This was so much fun to make. Thank you to my channel members for voting on this one. If you'd like to get a vote on videos that I make instead of, you know, just whenever I do it, make sure you check out channel memberships. The link is always down in the subscription. I have lots of options there for you. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.